Morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the 2021 State of the City event. Last year's event was also via Zoom. Maybe next year we'll be able to be in person at the McConnell Center. Things are certainly heading in that direction. I'd like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded. The forum is also being simultaneously broadcast live on Facebook and on Dover Channel 22. We will have that recording available for future broadcast on Channel 22 and also posting to the Chamber website. We have a wonderful program for you today. We're looking forward to that. I just want to remind everyone that we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. You can type your questions right in on Zoom in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you're on Facebook, you can type your comments in the comments section on Facebook. So we will read those questions aloud and our keynote speaker will answer them. So plenty of time for that at the end. Again, our program today is very strong. We're excited to hear from Assistant City Manager and Director of Planning and Strategic Initiatives, Christopher G. Parker. But before that, we'll hear from a couple of other speakers. And with all of our programs, this would not be possible without the generosity of our sponsor, Newburyport Bank, and our underwriter, Eversource. We're very pleased to have with us today from Eversource, Mark Sandler, who is their Director of Electric Operations. Mark?
Thank you, Margaret. And good morning, everyone. Once again, Eversource is pleased to support the Greater Chamber, the Dover Chamber of Commerce, and to serve as sponsor for this year's State of the City presentation. We're all proud of New Hampshire, to call New Hampshire our home. And during COVID-19, we have seen firsthand the resolve and commitment and can-do spirit of our citizens, emergency responders, municipal leaders, and owners of businesses of every size. The challenge for our hometown businesses across the state have been tremendous. But Eversource commends the Greater Dover Chamber and chambers around the state who have provided informational resources, support, and encouragement that are helping many businesses stay alive and keep their doors open when our citizens need them most. Here in New Hampshire, we have two great things going for us: a gritty independent spirit that doesn't give up in the face of a challenge, and a spirit of working together that gets things done when they can't be accomplished alone. With that in mind, we are especially pleased to be sponsoring today's program that celebrates Dover's award-winning master plan, a thoughtful balance of good places to live and of opportunities for economic growth. Eversource knows that providing reliable energy service for Dover and surrounding communities is more important than ever. And we're working to provide you with the solutions and services to meet your region's diverse energy needs. We remain committed to a clean energy future for New Hampshire and New England, one that includes plans for large-scale clean energy solutions such as offshore wind. It's a future that will also include an ever-growing number of local clean energy solutions led by municipals, businesses, and homeowners. We're already seeing that. As part of Eversource's commitment to be carbon neutral in our operations by 2030, we are also focusing on innovative solutions that will lower costs for customers, improve reliability, and advance clean energy throughout the state. By working together, even online like this morning, the opportunities to succeed are many and before us. So on behalf of everyone at Eversource, including our many employees who call Greater Dover home, thank you for joining us today, and best wishes for spring and summer of good health and great success. Thank you.
Mark, and thank you to Eversource. And I do hope we are expecting snow. I hope that doesn't interfere with any plans that you have or your employees have for this weekend. Who would have thought would be looking at snow at this time of year? So we're going to move into our program now. I just do want to remind everyone we are recording, and also to please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you do have questions for our keynote speaker, we will address those at the end. Before we get started, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Mayor Robert Carrier to provide some welcome remarks for us this morning. Mayor Carrier?
Yes, thank you very much, Margaret. And first of all, thank you to Eversource and Newburyport Bank for their sponsorships and all what they do for the city of Dover. Eversource, we're glad with the city of Dover to partner up with Eversource, and the future holds many new things. So, Margaret, it is my pleasure to welcome everybody this morning to Dover's 2021 State of the City Forum. The past 12 months have been nothing short of a challenge, we know that, but today we look to the future as we learn about the municipal master planning process and how it shapes and benefits our community. The city of Dover has been recognized multiple times for excellence in master planning. Our downtown pedestrian, vehicular access, streetscape plan was awarded the 2016 Plan of the Year by the New Hampshire Planners Association. The city's climate adaptation chapter of the master plan was the New Hampshire Planning Association's Plan of the Year in 2018. And in 2020, Frank Tour was named 2020 Citizen Planner of the Year by the New Hampshire Planners Association. Today's keynote speaker, Assistant City Manager and Director of Planning and Strategic Initiatives, Christopher Parker, was named to the 2011 Professional Planner of the Year by the Northern New England chapter of the American Planning Association. We're very pleased to have somebody with such high intellectual planning capabilities for the city of Dover, that's for sure. So before we get started, I'd like to invite Kevin McEnany, President of the Dover 400th, to bring us up to speed on the activities of the group tasked with planning Dover's 400th anniversary celebration. Kevin, over to you.
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Kevin McEnany, and as you probably know, Dover is celebrating its 400th anniversary of being a community in 2023. We're the oldest permanent settlement in the state and the 7th oldest in the United States, which is pretty amazing. The 400th Anniversary Committee started planning in mid of 2018 when we were an ad hoc committee of the Dover City Council. In 2020, we transitioned into a standalone nonprofit organization and received that official 501c3 designation in September of 2020. This was all in supported by the mayor, city manager, and the city council. So in 2020, our goal was to kick off annual events leading up to 2023. Unfortunately, we ran into a roadblock in the pandemic, and we had to cancel all the events that were planned. So we're moving forward in 2021. It started out tentatively, but planning is in full swing right now. We meet on a regular basis, and we're planning for many events for the next 3 years. One event that is occurring right now in 2023 has been an ongoing virtual seminar, historical seminars, which takes place the second Tuesday of every month. And you could log on to those seminars. They're at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month. You can log on through our website at dover400.org. That's DOVER400.org. They're very fascinating series, and the ones that have already taken place are actually available through, I think, the Dover download, so you can catch up on the ones that you've missed. So we are also planning or hoping to have a community event in the fall of 2021. It seems like things are opening up, and we look positive on that, so we'll be having more news as far as that goes. In 2022, the focus will be on the people of Dover, its past and present, immigrants and indigenous people who made us the city we are and continue to share in our future. We're working to have food, arts, and cultural festivals to celebrate and share the different communities in Dover with all of our citizens and neighbors. 2023, which will be the culminating year, we're going to celebrate our 400 post-colonialization years, honor the 12,000 years of pre-colonial history, and build excitement for the future of Dover, which all of our people will share in. fireworks, a street fair, a parade, educational opportunities, and other events are just a few that are being planned right now for 2023. One of our fundraising initiatives is the Dover 400 for 400. We are looking for 400 people to donate $400. This money will be used, it will be critical in funding our planned events for the coming years. If you'd like to participate, please log in at the website and dover400.org, and there's a link there in order to donate. We have a very active and hardworking committee, and I want to thank them all, but as you can imagine, it takes a lot of volunteers to pull something like this off, especially over a 3-year span. So we're encouraging volunteers to get a hold of us. Again, you can do that through the website, and we'll put you in touch with the proper committee chairs. So as a committee, we're committed to celebrating Dover, past, present, and future, and we're looking forward to a great series of celebrations. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to introduce Chris Parker, the Assistant City Manager, to give us an update on the state of the city.
Thank you, Kevin, and welcome to everyone. I'm going to hopefully share my screen correctly, and we'll be on our way. So hopefully on the screen right now is the title card. Typically at this point, we like to say the state of the city, and I'm going to say that the state of the city is strategic. I think that hopefully over the next half hour or so, you'll see how we have planned to be a strategic community, how we take those actions and we move forward through our operations. I'm going to go through what master planning is, and I'm going to run through our executive summary that we produce annually and provide an overview for you in case you would like to follow up and review the summary that's current. And then also I'd like to go through a couple recommendations so you can see real world application of some of our master planning work. And finally, because it is an ongoing process, we're going to review the next steps. And then as Margaret said earlier, happy to take questions at the end. Oops. So why does Dover have a strategic plan? One of the things that I think is important for us to continue to think about is that successful entities, whether it be a community, whether it be a business, whether it be an organization, have plans. I don't think you can name a Fortune 500 company that doesn't have a strategic or long-range plan. Dover, whether it's the municipal corporation or the community itself, it's the same thing. We have these plans so that we can continue to provide value for our customers, continue to look at overall organizational performance and capabilities, and continue to push ourselves, whether it's through organizational change, personal growth and development, or looking at ways we can create feedback loops to learn about what we need to provide our customers, what we need to provide ourselves as an organization, and continue to be dynamic and evolving. I think we can all look at things that have not continued to evolve, and they have devolved, they have withered away. And that's not what we need from a community standpoint. It's not what we need from an organizational standpoint. We need to continue to be a community that whether it's Kevin and his crew's grandkids and their great-grandkids are celebrating our 800th anniversary or other activities in the meantime, we need to continue to provide a positive future. And we only do that by thinking strategically and by thinking about how we have done things in the past and continue to grow. One other reason we have a strategic plan is because it works within our framework of performance excellence. Dover is a systems thinking organization. We like to learn, we like to evolve, we like to continually review where we've been and how we've gotten there. And this is at all levels of the organization. So whether it's our leadership, the city council and other policymakers that then take the master plan, the strategic planning document that we have that we're going to go through today, we all have that as it drives our customer focus. We then measure and analyze, and we want to evolve and we want to make changes to our customers focus, our workforce focus, our operations, and those drive results. Once we have those results in place, we can continue the loop again by refeeding all those results back through that same process. The leadership can see the results and see what has happened and how they want to continue to evolve. we can update our strategic planning to continue to have that process in place. We want to continue to have workforce focus, operational focus, and customer focus. And we certainly want to continue to have feedback loops and continue to measure our successes and also measure how we can improve on the things that were not necessarily as successful as we might have wanted. So what is a master plan? Some people might recognize this as a screenshot from an older computer and video game called SimCity. And here you see at the top of the screen, the plan or the layout of the community was such that the higher density, taller buildings are sort of the top of the picture. Towards the bottom of the picture, you see more single family detached. To the right of the bottom of the picture, you have some commercial. In the middle, you have a mixed use transitional. Certainly there's a land use component, and that's a strong component of our master plan. But you also see infrastructure, you also see roads, you see probably municipal buildings in this picture. You see, well, not a lot of landscaping, but certainly some landscaping and some street amenities and other functionality. And hopefully below those roads, there are utilities. Clearly this is a community that either runs 100% on solar or their utilities are buried. But that's the idea here is the master plan is a high level view of how a community can develop. It takes a look at various elements, whether they're land use or policy elements, and it brings them all together in a way that we can review and outline our goals and our objectives. Contrast it with this, which is more of a site-specific plan. This is a plan of a particular piece of land. It reviews where the buildings are going to go in more specificity. It lays out where parking would be. Clearly, it's still part of a community that doesn't have a ton of landscaping regulations because there's a handful of trees on the screen, but it lays out that more site-specific, that more detailed review. So going down from the 30,000 foot view to more of the 100-foot view. Similarly, a master plan might be something such as on the screen today or now, where we look at a street layout and we say we would like to have our streets with trees on them. We would like to provide for pedestrians and bicyclists and cars. We'd like to create an environment that is welcoming to all modes of travel. What it doesn't do is get to the more granular level of what type of tree that is, how the diameter of that tree is measured, how it's planted, how it's evolved. That's the more detailed level that comes after a master plan is in place. Master plans, as many else aspects of municipal government, are allowed by state law. If you're aware, we can't do things that aren't enabled by the state for a community to do. So through the revised statutes annotated 674-2 through 4 and 675-6, the planning board is enabled to do a master plan. I say to do because they're not required unless you want to have zoning or a capital improvements program. Otherwise, the master plan is optional. Master plan should be updated every 5 to 10 years. It should definitely be focused on public information and public hearings and receive that information and take it into account. And I think that one of the misconceptions is that the city council or the legislative body has the jurisdiction over a master plan. Certainly should be involved, and we've been very fortunate here in Dover to have counselors involved along the way. It helps their decision-making process to understand what went into developing the master plan. But the planning board jurisdictionally has the authority to review and draft the master plan. As I noted, the state gives us guidance on the master plan. You see before you on the screen the chapters that can be in a master plan. There are 17 in total. In Dover, we have done those that are in the yellow color. We have somewhat mixed them into each other. In other words, the historic resources, natural hazards, and cultural resources, we have combined into one stewardship chapter. Similarly, the land use and economic development and housing, we've combined into one chapter. Under state law, you only have to have the vision and the land use, the two with the asterisks on them. And that is what a lot of communities start with, and certainly we did as well. These chapters are what most people probably think of as a master plan, but there are definitely more avenues you can take. Right now, we are working on the community facilities and the utilities chapters. We combine those into one chapter, but that chapter was last updated in 2009, and we are currently working on that chapter now. As a sign of things and how they evolve, this chapter really comes together with a lot of resiliency levels in it. In the past, we have recommended buildings that might need to be overhauled or built, such as a new high school. In this chapter, I suspect we're going to focus more on making sure that the buildings we have continue to serve us in the manner we need them to serve, and take into account climate adaptation, climate change, opportunities for renewable infrastructure and energy sources, all of those things that are probably much more future thinking than we might have thought in 2009. You'll see that towards the bottom, the regional concern, community design, and neighborhood plan, those are 3 chapters we really haven't delved into, though we do work with the Regional Planning Commission on the regional concern level. They do their own level of master planning. And the community design and the neighborhood plan, I think there is elements of that in most of these chapters, as is the implementation. The implementation section is one that we put in every chapter, so that every chapter has a goal or a takeaway that we can then track and follow. One of the things that I'm very proud of working with this community is the level of community involvement and public involvement we've seen. As you look at the screen here, you'll see a lot of the names. I'm sure you recognize a lot of these names. I'm sure a lot of these names are in the audience today. We've had great luck as a community coming together to develop these chapters and develop these goals and objectives we want to tackle. There's some overlap here. You'll see names along in various elements, various chapters, sections. And you'll see people that wanted to join, work on a specific topic, and then didn't come back for another chapter. That's one of the things that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, is how Dover does its chapters. And I think it's been beneficial that we allow people to get in, focus where they want to focus, and then move on to other chapters. That's not how every community operates. And I think that's one of the things that hopefully makes our chapters more relevant and continue to be a positive impact on the community. So visioning, as I noted, there's 2 chapters that the state says you have to have, a vision section and a land use section. We started this visioning in 2012. It was great to have Kevin introduce me, because I think there's a great tie-in with the 400th anniversary. That's what we looked at our vision culminating in. So what is Dover's vision? It's to be a city with an emergent urban vibrancy, guided by a small town sense of community. You want to ask how we got there? Well, we got there because we recognized that when Dover celebrates its 400th anniversary in 2023, we wanted to be a community that was dynamic, that has a high quality of life. And we wanted to lay out themes or objectives that would help us get there. So you see these 8 elements on the screen now. They were the results of a visioning section that took place over about an 18-month period. Whether we did survey work, whether we did in-person stakeholder group meetings, we did small group, large group, we did phone and web survey, as well as some mail-in or hard copy surveys. The goal was really to engage the public and find out what they want. I should stress that this is not staff's idea of the community. This is not the planning board's idea of the community goals and objectives. It's the community's vision. So we really rely on developing that community contact, that community engagement, to really help us build a set of documents that we can then refer to over the following 10 years. So again, we worked on these elements. One of the things we did, and it was unique at the time, and I think other communities have seen the value, is we took these vision elements, we laid them out, and then we said, okay, how do the various chapters, various sections we're wanting to build on incorporate these elements? So as a chapter is developed, we come back to these elements, we come back to these goals, these overall vision statements, and really look to incorporate them in various chapter topics so that we can reinforce the connectivity between the various chapters. I want to go through what a master plan is. Number one, it's the community's vision. As I said, the goal here is to have a community vision, not a staff vision, not a policymaker vision, but the community's vision. It really should be driven by the feedback and the public input we get. It's a living, dynamic document. It's something that staff uses on a daily basis. We use it internally to help us develop budget priorities we'd like the city council to consider. We use it in the planning department. We use it specifically for plan review and help guide us on potential ordinance or land use regulation changes. It's a tool for managing growth. I hear all the time that growth is unmanaged in this city, and I'm sure there are some probably on this video that might have similar concerns. And I would ask you to go look at our master plan. Our land use chapter in particular, gives us a guide for how we want to grow as a community, where we want to have commercial and economic development growth, where we want to tackle housing diversity, housing needs. All of those things are contained within our land use chapter, and that helps us manage growth. It's a tool for that. It's a guide for capital spending. As I noted earlier, there are two reasons the state says you have to have a master plan. The first is zoning ordinance. You can't have a zoning ordinance without a master plan. You also can't have a capital improvements program, which is a tool that the city council uses to link our physical needs with our fiscal needs. It really drives our infrastructure spending, laying out how we need to replace and modernize and update our infrastructure. That is part of the master plan. It emanates mostly from the community facilities and utilities chapters, but the transportation chapter, recreation chapter, all have input on the capital improvements program and our capital spending. And finally, it's the city's strategic plan. As I mentioned at the start, here in Dover, we have strategic plans at the department and service orientation level. So if you can think of an area at the, whether it's here in City Hall or out in the community services you receive, those areas have their individual strategic plans. The master plan, what we're talking about right now, has an overall impact. It works for the community level. So it's a broader document. If you have do's, you probably have don'ts. So here, a master plan is not. It's not regulatory. It's a vision document. It's lays out what we want to do. It is not a guide for how to actually do it. And the example I used to use, if you recall years ago, you might have used triptychs from AAA if you were traveling across country, and you would say, I want to go from the Dover Chamber of Commerce to downtown Manhattan. And you would go and you'd get a triptych, and it would tell you how to get there and what you want to be looking for on the roadway. The master plan is that vision. It's the I want to get there and here's why I want to get there. That triptych was the regulatory portion. The turn left onto Central Avenue, follow it until Washington Street, turn right, and turn left onto Arch Street, turn right onto Silver Street, get on the Spalding, head south, etc. That is the more regulatory, the more descriptive. That's something that the master plan is not. It's also not a static document. We don't want to build it once and then sit on it. As I said, it's a dynamic document here in Dover. We actually, in the past, had done chapters in an every 10-year fashion. In 2012, we migrated towards a yearly focus. And we did this for a couple of reasons. One, it's less resource intensive. Instead of having a group of people come together for 18 months to 2 years and spending $200,000 at least to do the chapter, we ask people to give us a 6, 8, 10-month commitment, work on the chapter area they're focused on at a cost of approximately $25,000 a chapter. And we can focus those interests, bring people together, target their needs, and then move on. It also allows us to continue to be relevant because the chapters can learn from each other and continue to build on each other towards those initial vision elements that we discussed earlier. Third, a master plan is not a burden. It's not something we should say, oh man, we have to do this. We have to spend the money. We have to spend the time. Can we let it go a little longer? That's not what a master plan should be. It should not be a burden. It should be something that's easily readable. It should be something that's understandable. It should be something that the community can get behind and embrace. Don't always have to agree with all the things that the community says it wants to do, but at least you should understand where it came from and why we're doing it. While I mentioned that it's a guide for capital spending, I also want to point out that it's not funding. There are funding streams that the City Council can entertain for funding capital improvements programming, but the master plan does not lay that out. The master plan lays out the need and why the need is there. And finally, it's not a placeholder. We don't want this to be a document that we build and then sit on, or we build and we put in a shelf and congratulate ourselves that we've got it in place. It is certainly a document, whether reviewed online, reviewed in hard copy. It's something that we need to be constantly going back to, constantly having in the forefront of our minds. And to that point, that's one of the reasons why we do an annual update to the City Council and Planning Board on what activities have occurred as part of that master plan over the previous year. That's what I'd like to focus on for the next section. Every year in March, we produce an executive summary of our master plan. The master plan document has an introductory section, it recounts our vision, and then it goes through the various recommendations that have been generated through the sections or chapters that we have. You can see those chapters on the screen, and as I said earlier, some of these are amalgamations of other areas. So their Stewardship of Resources chapter contains a variety of resources. The Conservation and Open Space has information about both land preservation, but also the need to continue to conserve those spaces and activate and use those open spaces. There are various elements of our executive summary. It's a 70-page document or so, and I'm going to walk you through those elements now. Each section recounts the theme and vision. You'll see at the top, there's the title of the section, the land use analysis. We want to know when it's adopted. So we tell you that on February 24th, 2015, the Planning Board adopted that chapter, and it was based on the following themes and visions. Again, these all came from the 2012 vision chapter. That is followed by a matrix that breaks down the various recommendations, gives you an overview of the recommendation itself, a prioritization that's been assigned to it, short, intermediate, or long. And then it gives a responsibility. And I think this is one of the important parts to stress, is that these chapters and the recommendations from them need to get implemented. So in order to make sure we implement them, we assign responsibility for the implementation. Most cases, they are assigned to a board, committee, or commission. We want to have the public reviewing these and the public implementing the items that it wishes to implement. You'll see some are departmental, and the planning department is listed on the second item here, but the recreation department, the community services department, police department, multiple departments have various elements assigned to them. Furthermore, we want to make sure that there is a reference to the actual chapter. So here you see the first element is a recommendation to redevelop the city-owned Keynote waterfront parcel. Some of you might recognize that that is not a new recommendation. That's certainly one that we've been promoting for some time. This document, again, was approved in 2015. On pages 24 and 29 of that document, you can go and you can find the reasoning why we want to develop that waterfront parcel. The goal here is to say, okay, I'm glad it's in the implementation table, but I want more information. How do I find out why someone or some group thought this was important to put in? So we move it to, or we cite the reference point within the chapter here in the implementation table. And then the final element is the status. And the status could be in progress, which you see this one is, we hope, based on some of the work that the Keynote Waterfront Development Advisory Commission has been working on with their preferred vendor. that we will see plans before the planning board later this year. So you'll see that this one says it's in progress with 2021. Ongoing activities are things that really don't end. They are recommendations here to encourage development and redevelopment of the urban core. That's not something that probably has an end. We want to continue to promote active redevelopment and reuse of properties, keep them vibrant and dynamic. Completed gives you the year. So adopt legislation, including architectural and landscape design standards to ensure quality, historically appropriate building design. That was completed in 2019. What's important on the status level is whether something is completed, in progress, or ultimately something could be denied. That is a decision that the public makes, not staff. We take these to those various boards and commissions. In this case, the planning board and ultimately the city council, because we did come up with a zoning amendment to reflect this one. They needed to work on that together, and they passed the required zoning changes and site and subdivision changes to bring this to fruition. There have been some recommendations over the years that have not been recommended for approval, and that occurs, and that's okay. It's what the community wants. That's what's important. We've developed a dashboard so that you can see where the progress is. What this does is it takes all of the recommendations into account and breaks them into 3 categories: acted upon, in progress, and to be reviewed. And you can see here there's a real range of how much activity has occurred in each of the chapters. The open space chapter, 100% completed. That's the next chapter we're going to be working on. The recreation chapter, 83% needs to be reviewed. That should help tell you that that chapter is the most recent one that's been adopted. The facilities and utilities chapter, 98% of that is either in progress or acted upon. That's, as I said, the chapter we're working on right now. This refers to the 2009 iteration of that chapter. So you can see across the board here, we try to tackle items from each chapter on an annual basis. We try to identify through the budgeting process which of these chapters and their elements we want to be working on. Some of them have some cross-referencing. Some of them we can see across various items, and so we're able to tackle more over time. But the goal is to really keep track of all of the actions to date. So what have those actions been? It's always good to show out what we've done, some successes. So the climate adaptation chapter had recommended that we investigate the feasibility of implementing a food composting pilot program at Public Works to determine public interest in curbside pickup. Well, earlier this year, we started with 1 toter at the recycling center. And if you're not aware, you can bring food waste to the recycling center, put it in these bins. There are now 5, and I suspect soon we'll be seeing up to 8. These bins have been positively received, and I think it really shows the value of composting. If you're not aware, food waste is the heaviest part of your trash, and certainly drives up the amount of bags you need on your pay and display, but it also drives up the tipping costs. So having a composting program, not only does it help keep food waste out of the landfills and put it to a more appropriate use, but it also works towards lowering costs and being more resilient as a community. The land use chapter recommended considering a density bonus for smaller homes below 1,000 square feet and other innovative tools. This is a shot of a proposed project that was approved again earlier this year by the planning board for a cottage style development. These units actually are about 400 square feet. We have developed in 2018 and 2020 regulations for incentives at the 600 or below level, the 1,000 square feet or below level, and the 1,400 square feet or below level. So we implemented that, and we've seen, or we're starting to see, some use of those regulations. Next is a recreation chapter recommendation to create and install signage at each city park that establishes a recognizable and consistent brand throughout the city's park system. Here on the screen, you see the template of what those will look like. These are actually being installed as we speak. The crew from Ohio, the vendor that we selected, they have traveled with the signage over the past couple of days. They are here today. They're going to be digging holes throughout the community at our various parks over the next few days. And next week, you'll see park signs very similar to this going up at our various parks. Now, obviously, the neighborhood parks, their signs are going to be a little bit smaller, but the same basic idea that they will have a consistent brand throughout the system. Following up on that, that crew is also installing wayfinding signage. This will get, it was originally going to be done in phases, but they actually gave us a great price, and we were able to lay out the signage throughout the community. So between the wayfinding signs and the park signs, over 91 new signs will be going up over the next week and a half to 2 weeks. These signs, the wayfinding signs, welcome people to Dover, whether at a pedestrian level or a vehicular level, help you find the amenities, the services that you're looking for. We're going to be consistent in our deployment and layout, and we're going to create a scenario where you get off the Spalding or you've come in from one of our arterial roads, you'll be able to find your way around the community, get to a spot where you can get out of your vehicle and or off the train or off the bus and walk through. So there's not shown here, but there's a pedestrian level as well that will be implemented again over the next week to 2 weeks. I mentioned this one earlier, the architectural design guidelines. This is a project we applied for a grant for that helped us bring on a consultant to help the planning board through a subcommittee draft architectural and urban design guidelines for the central business district. Talks about streetscape, talks about amenities, landscaping, design, as well as building standards. Not everything is underway. I wanted to point out a couple of projects that I'm sure you're all familiar with that emanated through the master plan process. Here, the Community Facilities and Utilities chapter from 2009 recommended that we construct a police facility in conjunction with a parking garage downtown. As we know, in 2016, we were able to open that. That same chapter also recommended renovating Dover High School and the Career Technical Center. And as you all know, that center has been created and is underway. This one also shows you the solar panels on top of that building. Those were a recommendation that we look for continuing to find diverse and renewable energy sources to power our buildings. So we're able to do multiple recommendations through that structure. The recreation chapter, and this is the old chapter, not the current one, but it recommended reviewing and repairing the wall at the Fish Ladder Park. You might recall that park along the dam downtown. The wall had been under some stress for a while, and the recommendation from the recreation chapter was that we needed to review that. You see here in the picture the wall under construction. It has been fully constructed, and staff is now working with a landscape designer to come up with the park on top of that wall to replace the Fish Ladder Park with benches and trees and create that urban park that we've enjoyed in the past. There are many, many other examples of projects and activities that we all see today that came through our master planning process. Something like the dog park up at Long Hill Park. That was a master plan recommendation. The Downeaster, bringing train service back to Dover, recommendation of the master plan. It's going back some time, and this is one that personally maybe I'm not so sure we should have done, but changing Weeks Traffic Circle into Weeks Crossing. For those of you that recall, there was a large traffic circle in that area of the community. And in the 80s, that was a recommendation for updating and changes, and that occurred in the early 90s. One of the things we try to do through our master planning is link the chapters to what we hear from the City Council and the other policymakers as goals that they want to try to achieve. Typically, they fall into categories such as citizen engagement. They want to continue to have participation by our public members. Everyone wants to support economic development and diversity. We want to ensure that our infrastructure is maintained and safe. We want to maintain the health and safety and welfare of the staff and the residents and the property owners here in the community. And finally, there's always a need for continued collaboration and cooperation between the education and municipal side here in the city. Those elements, those goals appear in multiple chapters of the master plan. You can see here that across the board, I think we were able to tackle some of those elements and coordinate those activities, linking them to our strategic thinking. So next steps, this is the last section I wanted to cover. We started master planning in 1963, and were we in person, I would probably hold up that document now. It is I think it's a 50-page document. It's a great example of concise documentation. One of the chapter recommendations that I'm sure a lot of people probably wish had come through was it recommended a vehicular connection over the Bellamy River between the Garrison School area and Spur Road. Be an interesting scenario if that had occurred. It's an example of not every time you hit it out of the park and not every time you do a recommendation of the master plan. You can see between 1978 and approximately 2008, we did chapters on a 10-year period. As I noted earlier, 2012, we really transitioned to a once a year, once every 18 months process. So the 2012 chapter, the vision chapter, led into the land use chapter, which led into the transportation chapter, then our stewardship of resources, our climate adaptation, and finally in 2020, we adopted the most recent chapter, which was our recreation chapter. In that chapter, we continue to evolve by adding public art for the first time in a master plan chapter. I think it was a great process of working with both the Rec Advisory Commission as well as the Arts Commission to get them more involved and to lay out opportunities for public art throughout the community, not just because it's a recreation feature, it's really a cultural and recreation feature. And I think we want to really embrace that as we move forward. The cycle is pretty simple. The chapters exist. We look at the chapters, identify those elements we want to accomplish. We get them done. We monitor those. We use that monitoring to then develop the next vision, which then evolves into developing the future chapters, which gives us more lists of things to do. And we work on those and the cycle continues. Finally, under next steps, as I mentioned a few times now, the Community Facilities and Utilities chapter, we began it in 2020, working with a steering committee of 4 right now. We're hoping to wrap that up early 2021, and then we would like to work on the Open Space and Preservation chapter. That chapter hopefully will begin this fall and be completed in early 2022. At that point, we would like to maybe take a quick breather and then decide what we want to do when we become 500 or 4.25 or name the number over 400. The goal, as I said earlier, with the current vision chapter was to get us to 2023 and determine what we wanted to be as a community at 400. After Kevin and his group are done celebrating those successes, we need to start thinking about the future, and we need to continue to have a vision that is modern and that works for the community. Can't stress enough, we love the participation aspect. If you're watching this and you think I'd really like to be involved with the Community Facilities and Utilities chapter as it wraps up, happy to have you reach out to me. Or if you're interested in the open space and preservation, while we do send out press releases and we do work with stakeholders to try to identify people that would be good to serve on a steering committee, we're always happy to have those contacts in place and have a waiting list. So if you're interested, you've seen this and you want to learn more, please definitely feel free to reach out to me and we can get you on the list and we can talk about how you can be involved in our master planning here in Dover. So I'm going to actually stop the share and we can get to the questions at this point.
Okay, you have successfully stopped sharing. That is good. So we are going to open it up to questions at this time. We are monitoring questions on Facebook. So if you are watching us on Facebook and you have questions, you can type that into the comments section. And then if you are with us on this Zoom event, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. I do have one question that has come in thus far. I will read it aloud to you, Chris. To what extent does your apartment ensure that those who live in Dover and those who visit it experience it as a welcoming city and where there is racial equality and inclusion?
So that's a great question. We actually we reached out to the Racial Equity Committee that the council formed to seek guidance on how to better address those questions in the future. We want to be sure that we are representing all and inviting to all. Certainly that is not something that had the level of care given to it in the past. And I think it's something we definitely want to be embracing and definitely want to take into consideration, particularly as we move to the next visioning chapter. I think that's going to be a very, very strong element of how we can continue to be welcoming to all.
That is very important, and there's actually so much going around on that front now. It's something we should all be thinking about, not just the city, but all of us in our individual practices as well. But I do applaud the city for taking leadership on that, and that task force is a wonderful thing. Do you know if people want to get involved in that? Is there an opportunity to do so?
Sure, anyone could certainly reach out to me and be happy to have those conversations and happy to look at ways. One of the things that I really enjoy about working for this organization is that we're a learning organization. We're always seeking to get better. We're always seeking to do things a different and more productive way. And so we can't learn if we don't get feedback.
Well, that certainly has been my experience in the short time I've been working in the city of Dover, Chris, and kudos to you and the rest of your team for that. There is a comment, this is less of a question, more of a comment, but maybe you could address it. And I'm not sure exactly what it says. Cycling over, or should it be cycling cover, should include clear intent wording?
The way I'm wondering that is if the comment is that the cycle screen that I show, it's very basic and it's intended as a high level conversation. There certainly is a lot more involved through the monitoring process. There's a lot more steps we take to monitor, to implement those. One of the things I think is interesting is the implementation. While we try to implement what the master plan recommendation says, we also have to keep modern and keep current. So when we go to the city council and ask for their approval to do things, we want to make sure that that is, while something might have been recommended in 2015 or 2011, it makes sense now, and that we keep in our minds the ability to get that feedback and make sure that the project in place is a project we need.
And when you mean project, does that include, I mean, I assume you work closely with Dan Barafaldi, your economic development director. Do you mean those types of projects too? Businesses coming to the state looking for diversity in that?
Certainly, our land use chapter has a strong economic development component, and Dan is certainly a strong part of that implementation. I think that we've worked really strongly as a team here in Dover. When we have a economic development project or when we have an infrastructure project, we rely on each other to provide positive feedback and move those projects ahead as a team. And I know Dan likes to say he's a one-armed paper hanger, but he's got a team behind him, whether it's myself, whether it's the community services department, whether it's police, fire, welfare. We're all looking at these projects from a community benefit standpoint, and we want to make sure they get implemented properly.
Exactly. You know, I guess it's a double-edged sword. You want the growth, you want the businesses, because we need good jobs for our people. We need tax revenue for the city. But, you know, you see all those comments sometimes on the various Facebook posts about, you know, the too much growth or nobody can afford Dover anymore. Can you talk a little bit more about the housing aspect part of it and what the city's thoughts are on that?
Sure. So diversity of housing is a really important topic. And I think we need to keep in mind a few things. The city only controls so much. We really only control the legislative side of that, the zoning, the land use, that side of it. We don't control what wages are. So we don't control if wages haven't kept track with cost. We don't control the cost of materials. And those are really driving up a lot of the costs today. The cost of materials, whether it be the wildfires that occurred out west that took out a lot of the materials, a lot of the hardwood, and also created demand by burning 1 million or 1,000 houses. But also things, the cost of gypsum has gone up, the cost of steel has gone up based on some tariffs. So there's a lot of material cost. So we are recognizing that, but we're also recognizing trends and how things have evolved. I like to tell the story that I have never actually lived alone. I grew up here in Dover, and I had two brothers. There were 5 of us in the household. I moved out. I went to college. I had 3 roommates in college. I came back. My parents and I quickly decided it was not a wise move for me to live in their basement. And so I moved out on my own, and I had a roommate. And then I met my wife and had that, and then we had a child. And I don't know what it's like to live alone, but I know that there are a lot of people today that is a decision that they'd like to have. They'd like to have the opportunity to live alone. And when you live alone, the costs are different. You can't share them as much, so they impact you more. And I think that sort of demographic change is something we see. We also see the trends that people are building single and 2-bedroom units because that's what the trends are. And I think it's unfortunate. I'd love to see more families living downtown, more 3-bedroom units to attract more people to live in our urban environment, just as they live in our more rural environments. So that's something that the planning board is actively engaged in, is understanding where the market is, understanding where the trends are, and keeping our focus on what those outside variables that we can't control, but we need to be able to roll with.
And I do have to say, it is wonderful to see how attractive Dover is to young people. It just really makes for a very vibrant downtown, whether it's singles or families, as you said.
You know, I think that is I said earlier that I think the community members, the public participation we get in the engagement really makes this community the strong community it is. We're the youngest community in the state, and I think we want to continue to be there. I'm very, very lucky that our planning board, or I should say we are all lucky that our planning board has 50% at this point of membership that has been in Dover for a long time and remembers what things have been like, and 50% are younger and have a vision for the future. Annually, up until over the past year, as part of our master planning process, we would go to the Dover High civics class and talk to the students. I figure I'm cleaning up the mess that people before me left. They're going to be cleaning up my mess. So how can we engage high school students to say, what do you want? What will keep you in this community? What are the things that attracted you or would attract you to being in Dover when you are out of school or raising a family? What are those elements, and how can we continue to keep those elements at the forefront of our mind?
That's good. And I do hope you'll be able to get back to that classroom next academic year. A couple of other things have come in on our Q&A. One seems to be more of a comment, but maybe you can speak to it. So this gentleman is saying he's been involved with 2 different master plan efforts and found that the involvement of volunteer boards, city staff, and tracking actions is important to success. And you seem to be of that mindset as well, that it's a group effort.
I think it's a scenario where staff is here to facilitate the chapter. The steering committee and the planning board actually draft and approve those chapters. One of the things that I think is most important for staff is really the monitoring and the implementation. And that's why I'm very glad that for the past 12 years, annually, we've given a report to the planning board and the city council. They need to know what we're doing and how we're doing it, and allow the pressure back of why aren't we doing more, or, hey, let's put the brakes on. We've got to tackle a little less and enjoy some of what we've done.
So we do have another question. I just want to remind people, we did bill this event as a 9 to 10, but if Chris is willing, would love to stay around and answer some more of your questions. So please put those in. We're going to leave the Zoom link up and live here, so we'll stay with you as long as you have. But Chris, gentleman is asking, are there any provisions in the master planning process to address public safety issues? Some examples might include when and how do police, fire, and medical services expand and grow with the community, and how does community reform desires fit in?
So that chapter, or those elements, are in a couple different chapters. The transportation chapter certainly would look at speeds and look at some of our traffic safety elements. And then the community facilities chapter, which we're working on right now, has a strong public safety aspect. That is where we would look at how our facilities and how those in our facilities operate, and where we can make some changes. Additionally, as I noted, both the fire department and the police department do their own strategic planning efforts on a more service area level. And I'm sure both chiefs would be happy to follow up with that gentleman, or I assume it was a gentleman, wanted to email me. I'm happy to put him in touch with either chief.
We did hear from Chief Haas last year when we did the State of the City. I think we did it more in the fall last year, and he certainly has been instrumental throughout the pandemic. I don't know if people realize he also serves as our emergency management. Is that what you would call it, director? And so he has certainly had his hands full with this. And I know I got my vaccine at the C&J Trailways, and the Dover Fire and Rescue were the folks out there administering that. So very fortunate to have a staff like that. So you mentioned they do their own planning process, but do they come to you and see how it fits in with the larger?
So myself and two members of my staff work with, we split up I think there's 13 service areas. We split them up so that we're looking at them as a team. And we have worked with each department head or service area head. What they do is they bring in their own stakeholders, whether it's staff, whether it's outside customers they deal with, or other stakeholders, to help them develop what would be a long range, and in the terminology for the various departments, it's a 5-year outlook. So we want to keep those a little bit more relevant to the current, but as opposed to the 5 to 10 year that a master plan chapter might look towards. But we do, we work with our stakeholders, internal and external, to develop those. We are actually going to start, the current round is wrapping up. We're going to start in August, rewriting those sections.
Never ends, Chris. You finish one, you start another. But I can see how the fire and the public safety would have to be a little bit more fluid to respond. You know, the master planning is a long process, but as things evolve in a community, that might happen more quickly. So they might have to be a little bit more fluid in their planning.
So I would say that while I always like to say that police and fire are the areas that you can easily understand in municipal government. You know, someone's going to protect you and someone's going to stop you or also protect you. But all of the service areas, whether it's the city clerk's office, whether it's the finance and purchasing, whether it's recreation planning, we all need to be doing these, because we all need to be nimble and we all need to be able to reflect. It's really interesting, and I'm sure that you've experienced this and the viewers have. Things change at a much quicker pace than they did 20 years ago. You need to be much more responsive and much more in tune, whether it's because of social media, you can get that response feedback quicker, whether it's because we just, all of a sudden 30 seconds isn't 30 seconds anymore, it's 10. We want much more responsiveness, and we need to be, from a government standpoint, is both proactive and responsive as we can be at the same time without being damaging. So I think in that mind, all of our service areas need to be able to see what's going on in the outside world, see what's going on in their internal world, and make sure that we're providing the best services we can.
And I think that really came through during the pandemic in the response that the city of Dover had to the restaurants. You know, the outside eating, you know, not saying, well, we'll have to take that up, we'll have to look at it. That, you know, action was needed immediately, and the city is to be commended on how rapidly they were able to bring that out and help our restaurants.
I said earlier that one of the things that that's kept me here, and I really like working for this organization, is that it's a learning organization. The other thing is we don't talk about doing things, we do things. So for all of the master plan work that I've just spent the last hour talking about, internally, things like the outdoor seating, we don't talk about how nice it would be to have outdoor seating. We say, we need to do that. And so how can we do that within our framework and within our processes? And if our processes need to change, and that's one thing, it's a good example. We went to the city council and we said, there are a couple of things that we need relief on. We're not going to charge permits this year. We're still going to inspect. We're still going to make sure things are safe, but we're going to allow parking spaces to be used as dining areas where needed. That's a relief element that we came up with. We went and sought, we got it done. And I think that's hopefully what keeps us evolving in a positive manner. Is we like to master plan, we like to treat things strategically, but we also like to get things done.
It is wonderful, honestly, all last summer and now as we get into the warmer weather, just driving through downtown and people seeing, you know, outside and enjoying the outside. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So
I love that some people did it even in the winter.
They did. That's true. Garrison City, they were out there huddled around those heaters.
They looked at their customers and they said, hey, we'll do it if you'll do it. And people responded.
And people did it. People did it. Yeah, we're hardy New Englanders. I guess exactly. I guess we can do that. But it just, you know, I guess to sum up, because we are going over our time here, it's a balancing act. It sounds like, you know, the looking long term, but being able to take action where needed quickly. And again, kudos to you. Any closing remarks you'd like to offer before we wrap up?
While I appreciate the kudos, I think the kudos really goes to our policymakers and the folks that make those decisions that enable the staff to continue to do this strategic thinking and have understood and embraced that we do it. I think that without progressive policymakers, we would not be the community we're at.
Yeah, and I guess that's a plug for be sure to run for office if you're of that ilk, and if not, get out there and vote, because those policymakers, they do have an impact, and it is important. So as we wrap up, Chris, I'd like to thank you. And as you said, it's not just you. You have a team behind you, and we thank all of you, all the folks at the City of Dover. Also Mayor Carrier for spending time with us today, and Kevin McEnany speaking on behalf of Dover 400. That's another great group of volunteers. I'd like to thank our sponsors, of course. We had Newburyport Bank was our sponsor today, and Eversource, who was with us this morning, was our underwriter. And thank you to everyone who tuned in this morning. And if you couldn't tune in live, you'll have the opportunity to watch it later. That's the beauty of technology and the situation we're in now. So have a great day, everyone. Stay well. Take care.